the estimating, but we do that just so you have a frame of reference. From the outside, it looks like a pretty easy process. We design something, Pike Estimates goes out to bid, and we're there. The reality is that there's a tremendous amount of dynamism in the process and
In the market as well,
in
during
the
this whole
market, yeah.
period, so we're constantly marrying up the market, what's happening, what we're seeing being purchased for versus what's in the building, what's getting designed, and we're, you know, constantly communicating back and forth, what if we did this, what if we detailed this way?
So we sweat bullets to make sure that we preserve the core project and can assure that it comes in on budget, because disaster happens if we don't. So we're in good shape financially. The project is, in essence, exactly what you've seen all along. But what we really wanted to come and talk to you today about is what it looks like. And I'm just going to preface this. Leanne's going to present the actual project. I'm going to preface it with just a little story about how architects work, because I think you'll find it informative. So we're doing a building addition, right? So we're going to add something to this structure. And that is probably the most common challenge architects face. Maybe 10% of construction is brand new buildings. Most are additions. And there's some basic approaches we take. So if you take something like the Albright Knox, all right, we see this all the time. You have an older building, you want to put addition onto it. It was built in roughly the turn of the century. There's no way in God's green earth you could put an addition on with another 37 ionic columns, marble. It just doesn't happen. Old buildings, you just can't, in general, replicate them. So when you have an older building that has a tremendous amount of personality, is in this case an iconic structure, well, what do? How do you put addition on it? And you've all seen it, of course. Well, you put a neutral building, in this case, a few feet away from the original. And some people might look at it and say it has nothing to do with that building, but it's been highly praised over the decades because it's quiet enough to let the original building remain as the focus. But architecturally, if you go back and look at this, you will find that, whoops, that's the wrong button. The base that that black box sits on is in fact a continuation of the base that the Albright sits on. So the architects look for clues in the original building, elements that can give continuity to the addition, all right? So while the building may look nothing like, and that was very intentional, there's continuity with elements from the old building. So that's an extreme example, right? We're not getting onto the Albright Knox here. I'll give you a little bit closer to home. Bennett High School, 1927, I think. All right, not nearly as elaborate as the Albright, but still a very iconic structure. Materials in terms of the limestone columns, and we can't recreate that. All right. In this case, we had to add 18 classrooms to the building. Well, we couldn't very well build a glass box 120 feet away, right? It's part of the same school. So what do? Those are the additions. And in this case, there's 9 classrooms, and there's another 9 classrooms. All right, so in this case, because we were building on the back of the building, the decision was to build additions that look like they're part of the original structure. And I talked about that plinth at the Albright being the continuity. Well, here we were able to take some elements of the original building, this limestone band, and carry it now in precast, because limestone's a little exorbitant, across here. And across here, the windows are the exact same. Brick is brick. That hasn't changed much over the years. If an architect looks at this, they know it's an addition because the original architect would have brought that cornice over and stopped it there, right? I mean, they're not going to spend the money on the cornice at the back of the building, but if those classrooms were originally there, that element would have continued, but it didn't make sense financially to do that here. So, 2 examples. One, a really iconic structure that you can't match. Here, somewhat less iconic. We wanted to blend in the addition. But the point is we're always looking at what's there first before we tackle what's new. And again, you're gonna go through some slides of existing here.
So as Brian kind of walked you through those other two examples, I'm gonna walk you through the same thing that we did with Tonawanda Schools. And one of the very first things that we recognized when we came out here is thinking about where that addition wants to go and the opportunity of kind of redefining a main entrance to the building along Fletcher, which in the earlier plans, you can see that the location of our new addition would basically recreate what is now the existing entrance along Fletcher, which then relates back to where the new bus loop is going to be and so on from there. But the other thing that we noticed is, unlike the two examples that Brian just showed you, is that this campus doesn't exactly have an iconic image, a very strong identity and personality. It's kind of been a hodgepodge of additions over the years. So for us, it was very hard to find, such as in Bennett High School, something that was continuous throughout the entire building that would kind of define what we were doing here. But some of the things we did pick up on are, in thinking about entrances, the existing entrance along Fletcher being kind of somewhat set back, not very easily recognizable. The secondary entrance off the parking lot, which in the new site plan you'll see is going to be heavily utilized. But what's missing here is, weather protection for waiting and just helping, because this is the side of the building that's going to receive a lot of the sun and the wind and the rain all season long. Some of the other things are these, which have lovingly become known as the Legos. The most recent addition to the building really are a series of 3 large classroom volumes. While they function really great from an interior circulation pattern, they really lack kind of an identity and character along that face of the building. But some of the things that we did pull from this is, for example, the texture and the tone of the brick, the neutrals, the lights and the dark, kind of beiges and browns, which contrast to the very dark brick that faces that auditorium kind of entrance along Fletcher. Here you see there's kind of a consistent cap banding along the top of those volumes, and window-wise, it's a series of punched opening windows as opposed to these major additions, which we call those ribbon windows, kind of more linear, kind of consistent window openings. The other thing we looked at with these angled wall additions along Fletcher was materiality. In contrast to the brick, there's a lot of metal panel both on the roofing here and kind of along the face beneath the windows. And kind of the dynamic part of that move was the angled volumes and the linear planes of where those metal angled volumes kind of intersect the brick that you see throughout the rest of the building. So these were just some of the things that we pulled, the idea of the large kind of volumetric masses, the angled walls, the materiality and the colors and tones and textures, and those are some of the things that we were thinking about when we thought, what does this new addition want to look like?
Just to add one comment apropos of the Albright and Bennett, if you ever went back to Bennett High School yearbooks, and I haven't, but I can guarantee that the class pictures were taken where? Right under the front doors, because that's where that's the image of the building. And we live near the Albright, and there are wedding photographs being taken there continuously. For good or ill, this is a building without any iconic image. And there's no place, if the graduates wanted to take a picture, there's no place in this building where you would say, that's Tonawanda High School, or senior high, middle school. It's either, in the case of the Legos, is utterly bland, or in the case of this edition, they're just kind of almost quixotic. I mean, they look different, but they don't really create an image. So part of the challenge, this is, the challenge we felt was the exact opposite of the Albright, where you have a building with tremendous character, you're being asked to add on to it, and your job is not to intrude. With this building, we had a building we thought cried out for some character, and we believe that this will be the last addition to the school. There will be renovations in the school for the next 100 years, but unless the population changes and goes back up significantly, you won't be adding to this building anymore. So we thought this was the opportunity to really give this building some character.
So, one of the other things we looked at is the opportunity of this addition being a music suite, and in thinking of that idea of being iconic and making a statement, what are some ideas that we could do with kind of being a little bit playful with what the exterior of the building is going to look like. So we looked at the idea, actually Stephanie came up with this, of actually mapping music along the face of that building. So just as a quick study, kind of taking an abstract of sheet music and laying those notes out, you know, on a staff, and how that translates into what the face of a building could look like. This is kind of a cartoon diagram, but you can see this is the auditorium in the background. So it begins to kind of set up a grid, and these notes translate to areas where you would have windows. And in rooms such as the music instruction room that functions more like a classroom, you might want a higher concentration of windows kind of lower than ground. Whereas in the band room and the ensemble room, you might not want, for both acoustical purposes and for lighting purposes and glare, you might not want a lot of low windows, so those punch openings would follow up higher. And the rest of the notes kind of play into the different tones and colors and textures within the building. So that was kind of our concept behind how we designed the addition. So we took that one step further and looked at the sheet music for Tonawanda Alma Mater, and took the last line that says, "Hail to thee, our alma mater, Tonawanda High." And this is the music that we used to map on the face of the building.
We'd asked the board to sing this a little later, but we'll get a chance to.
Lynn and I definitely have.
So this is the image of the addition here. So I'll walk you through. This is the view along Fletcher Street if you're standing on the opposite side of the street from the residences. So some of the ideas that we pulled earlier, we have one single large volume, one mass of this addition that we're building, and talking about those series of planes and angled walls, accenting that along the roof line and kind of anchoring down where that building terminates. So kind of holding the one edge of the building. The other angled plane turns down and frames the entrance canopy. So now we've kind of bookended a start and a finish point to this essentially sheet of music. There's a continuous ribbon window, which we pull from the same elevation along Fletcher Street here, at the high level here, so providing natural daylight that you don't necessarily have to worry about controlling all day long from above. And then the facade really becomes that abstract of that sheet music, where we put in windows where we need windows, we change up different color panels, looking at keeping in line with the same tones and textures of the brick that you have throughout the building. So this setback here is that main entrance, and immediately adjacent to that is that main office, and we would continue the windows there. So from the main office, you'd be able to have visibility directly out onto the main entrance there to see who's coming in, as well as once you go in the front doors, it's visible from the inside. So we also think this is a really great opportunity, the idea of the continuous window along here, to have something that kind of is illuminated 24 hours and kind of glows and becomes almost like a beacon for the building, calling up that entrance point. So kind of looking at it in the larger context, circling back to the major stadium, this is, you know, where you see in relation to the new Clint Small. So we have, you see the Clint Small ticket booth here, the main home seating with concessions and restrooms beneath there, and then the stadium off to the left-hand side here. There would be some visitor bleachers set up on the opposite side of the stadium as well, with the additional field work that you can see on this image here. But we've created some pockets of outdoor space for bike racks. You can see directly the relationship of the new bus loop and its relationship to that main entrance to the building, and kind of really trying to direct the pedestrian flow through that. We're also adding a small canopy off that side entrance here to kind of help with the weather protection from that entrance.
I didn't realize the bus loop was that long, that's very
cause I thought before the buses was further down, like that goes past the other, yeah, closer to this end.
It'll really relieve the.
It's actually, I think the,
Almost goes to the end of the building, doesn't it?
I'm gonna flip all the way back here to the site plan real quick. The endpoints of it line up with the street edges there,
Yeah.
so it should really start to help with traffic flow.
There's a canopy there too, right there on the,
On that side, yep, back here,
right there,
yep.
weather canopy.
How resistant, will, I like the motif, being an art major, I like it, but how resistant will it be to graffiti?
It's actually very resistant. We're looking at two different products here. The darker panels, it's basically like it's a heavy-duty exterior laminate product. It's almost similar to like what this center tabletop is, but it's much, much thicker. It's resistant to not only scratching, but it's very easy to clean for graffiti purposes, as well as the lighter panels that you see that are going to be raised off the building, same thing. But one of the other things we're doing is pulling some